I can still picture the precise angle of her lips when she spoke, as if Marissa were subtly inspecting a painting she had long pretended to appreciate. When she leaned her head slightly, it was as though she were appraising something no longer worthy of feigned affection. Her laughter lacked the resonance of an echo. Instead, it sliced through the silence. I posed a straightforward question to her, and my tone didn't convey anger or pleading, merely fatigue. "Are you certain about this decision?" I inquired, standing within our former living room now filled with boxes and phantoms. With no pause for thought, she replied, "Jonah, I require more than you'll ever be capable of providing." Her response was swiftly followed by a brief, biting chuckle, tinged with contempt. "You won't make it without me." I do not recall if I offered any retort. Perhaps I merely stood there, the atmosphere thickening moment by moment as she collected her last designer bags. The suitcase's wheels clicked against the hardwood floor like period points in a sentence I didn't wish to decipher. And behind her, a smirk graced the face of her companion, his sunglasses perched atop meticulously styled hair. Griffin Hart was a man who embodied wealth and power. He didn't bother with menial tasks like carrying his own bags or checking his bank balance. I had come across his name previously, as he owned a restaurant chain and had just opened one downtown with an excessively pompous name and a waitlist-only policy. And now it seemed he had captured her attention. Griffin spoke little, but his silence was laced with arrogance, suggesting he considered me unworthy of competition, assuming I would be grateful for clearing up the mess. He gave me a look I would never forget, one that said, "This was inevitable." Then he casually draped an arm around her waist, as if she were his possession. She remained unfazed, neither flinching nor looking back. They exited the premises together, their heels clicking like the rhythm of my disintegration. For hours I sat in the quietude left behind. My phone buzzed once, a message from my friend Eric asking if I was okay. I chose not to respond. Could I express anything else? That my spouse abandoned me for a man who likely consumed expensive smoothies and maintained a skincare regimen more extensive than my shopping list. She claimed I'd never succeed, as if I were some unpolished prototype of success she had evolved past. I stepped into my bedroom, opened the closet, and gazed at the vacant side where her garments once hung. That side always carried a scent of lilac and ambition. Now it simply smelled of wood and air. The hangers jingled as I ran my hand through them, their teeth gleaming mockingly. It was then that the ember within me ignited. At first, not a blaze, not even a spark, merely a simmer. I stood there for perhaps 10 minutes before uttering it aloud, neither to anyone nor myself, but to the quiet. I'll transform into everything she believed I couldn't become. I didn't comprehend its implications fully then, but I understood it would cause less pain to construct than to mope. I began modestly, discarding the wine glasses she cherished so dearly. Removed the frame, hanging above the bed, symbolizing our growth together. I cleaned out the fridge, discarding leftovers of her almond milk and expensive organic spreads. The house seemed vacant, yet I was tired of her spectral presence residing for free. I called in sick the following day, informing them I required time. They replied, "Take as much as you need." I believe they thought I'd return dejected, but I had no intention of going back. Instead, I spent that week revisiting every notebook I'd filled since college. Every technology concept I set aside due to lack of time or courage. I consumed coffee like water and sketched out blueprints as if still in a dorm room, driven by passion and ramen noodles. By the end of that week, I had the foundations for something genuine, something that felt like my own creation. I began designing a prototype for a tech consultancy focusing on dynamic business intelligence dashboards. Something minimalistic, adaptable, scalable. I even gave it a name, Vanguard Pulse. The name seemed like motion, like resistance, yet the nights remained tough. I'd recline in bed, one arm propped behind my head, scrutinizing the ceiling fan's endless rotation. That's when her voice would insidiously surface, "You can't make it without me." Sometimes I conceded her truth. Often, I let bitterness harden me. I deleted her from everything, not because I loathed her, though I may have, but because I couldn't tolerate diversions. I knew she'd be out there with him, enjoying wine on rooftops, chuckling in restaurants beyond my means, smiling into selfies that proclaimed she had advanced. But I didn't seek updates. I yearned for tranquility, and peace, I discovered, necessitated solitude. I initiated a habit of penning a note to myself each morning on a post-it and pasting it on the bathroom mirror. She chuckled. That was the first one. Construct. That was the second. It transformed into a routine. Some people meditate. I reinforced why I was fighting. Eventually, friends ceased contacting me. Many found themselves at a loss for words. Some wished to remain neutral. I couldn't fault them. I had transformed into the one who was abandoned, the one who was ousted, the one expected to recede in someone else's rise. Yet I didn't recede. I advanced. The pain lingered within me, not as a fresh wound, but as a scar that constantly reminded me of the day everything shattered. Her laughter still echoed in my mind on occasion. In the quiet hours of night, when exhaustion set in and the glow of my computer was the only illumination in the room. Every time it resurfaced, I leveraged it, using it as fuel, as evidence. One day, when she recollected that laughter, I wanted her to rue it. Not out of malice, but because she undervalued the wrong individual, and I was determined to ensure she never made such a blunder again. There were no outbursts, no dramatic scenes, no tears on either side. Just documents, quietness, and a signature that formalized everything. Marissa pushed the divorce documents, similar to a takeout menu, onto the polished desk at the lawyer's office. Her meticulously groomed fingernails clicked against the edge, as if urging speed from Jonah. Already adorned like a woman beginning a new chapter, with styled hair, an expensive blouse seeming more fitting for a photo shoot than a legal process, and a purse that likely cost more than my laptop, she wasn't wearing her wedding ring. It had been absent for weeks. I stared at the papers. Her name was already inscribed in flowing lines, resembling a flourish. She didn't merely seek freedom. She aimed to depart as if she'd never been bound by me at all. Without a flinch or plea, my pen traced across the line. Jonah Ellis. This marked the end of a marriage that had effectively perished. Outside, she smiled and asked, "No ill feelings, correct?" That was her final statement to me in person. I watched as she walked towards a parked black Mercedes situated across the street. Griffin sat at the wheel, his gaze never veering away from me, making no effort to conceal it. With sunglasses obscuring his eyes, one hand loosely gripping the steering wheel as if he had already claimed what was once mine. In a sense, he did. They departed before I could walk away. The wind stirred up dust as I approached my used Toyota, with a broken windshield and 2 unattended oil changes in its history. Yet, it didn't matter to me about the car or my appearance or what lay ahead. Since I signed those papers, something within me had transformed. It wasn't merely the end of a marriage, but the ending of who I once was. The man who hesitated, the man who questioned, the man who believed love alone could sustain a legacy. I didn't contest her for the house. I didn't desire it. Every corner reeked of past disputes. Every wall echoed her name. Let her keep the dishes, the table we seldom used, and the set of knives we received on our anniversary. I allowed her to retain our shared friends who had subtly chosen her side, but were too courteous to declare it openly, for that circle was already closed. I saw no reason to knock on doors where I wasn't invited. What I yearned for couldn't be compartmentalized or distributed via court judgments. I sought something with my name etched in it, my blood as its foundation. I said nothing to anyone, neither friends nor family. I drained every dollar from my emergency fund, my long-accumulated investments, and transferred the entire sum into an account I renamed Vanguard Pulse Holdings. The name sent shivers down my spine when I typed it. It was tangible now, irreversible. I abandoned social outings, ignored group chats, even let my Netflix subscription expire, not out of self-denial, but to deprive the parts of me that thrived on comfort. Comfort slowed me, softened me. I could no longer afford softness. Every dawn, I awoke at 6 a.m., drafted a fresh to-do list on my window using a dry erase marker. Market research, product prototype, back-end architecture, domain registration, competitor analysis. No team was necessary at this point. I needed action that could transform into progress. From my modest desk in the corner of my recently rented one-bedroom apartment, I worked tirelessly. Bare essentials: a mattress on the floor and an aged coffee pot. No decorations, no candles. The air filled with caffeine, not sentimentality. I aimed to make every corner of that apartment shout, "Progress." Hour after hour, I labored without a blink, designing pitch decks, writing user flows, and creating dashboard interfaces on Canva as if it were sacramental. Books on scaling, automation, data science, investment strategy, long neglected works, now graced my eyes. More times than I could count, I dozed off with a laptop on my chest. On the nights when sleep eluded me, I composed emails, many cold ones. To venture firms, individual investors, and business accelerators, I anticipated rejection, which I accepted graciously. Each refusal brought me one step closer to an affirmative response. Vanguard Pulse was a secret I kept even from Eric, my friend since college. I knew his advice would be to take some time first. But I didn't want time, I desired progress. The world had advanced, and I refused to remain stationary in its wake. Marissa, on the other hand, seemed to flourish, at least digitally, attending wine tastings in Tuscany, twinning outfits with Griffin, brunch photos tagged #BesLife and #NextChapter. Though I never clicked those posts, glimpses on mutual friend stories were enough. They were presenting their joy as marketable content for a brand. Perhaps it was, and yet none of it resonated with me genuinely. Because every time I saw her face, I recalled that moment, the sound of her laughter in our old hallway fading as she turned her back on me. That sound left an indelible mark, which now served as motivation. After a month of toil, I discarded my old email address. It was filled with phantoms and unwanted recollections. In its place, I established a new one using my business domain. Every message I sent should reflect my future. I wasn't merely creating a corporation, I was crafting an identity, an unfamiliar one to her and even to me. At 3:14 am one night, the logo emerged, a shield encompassing a pulse waveform, a symbol of strength and rhythm, both traits I was learning to command. By week's end, I unveiled the beta site without pomp or fanfare. With a single click on Publish, and leaning back in my chair, I felt a sensation I hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't hope or despair, it was certainty. This wasn't retribution, it was transformation. Let her keep the extravagant wedding china and Griffin's hollow accolades. I possessed something more valuable now, a purpose, a well-oiled machine in motion. I had signed the divorce papers, but on that day, what I truly endorsed was a proclamation. In this form of myself, I wouldn't wait for anyone's approval to make an indelible mark. There was no glamour in it, just raw effort and a shared workspace filled with the aroma of burnt coffee and tension. The chairs squeaked, the heating seldom worked, but that space held significance. It was where Vanguard Pulse thrived, born from an idea on my laptop and a relentless determination within me. While Marissa sunbathed on a yacht in Greece with Griffin, I dined on instant noodles at my desk, clinging to the Wi-Fi as I coded back-end integrations. This wasn't about building a startup, it was about reclaiming my self-worth. Long hours weren't a show of strength, they were necessity. I arrived before the rush of freelance designers and marketing consultants and stayed till the night janitor signaled with a look that hinted at my persistence. At that time, I had no employees, just unwavering determination and an unyielding spirit. Originally just a concept I clung to, an idea that persistently refused to be buried despite mockery from many. Indeed, they mocked. Old acquaintances, even friends. A specific call remains etched in my memory from an ex-colleague named Lance, who once implored me for assistance during a system transition. I extended an invitation for a demonstration of the dashboard. "You," I inquired, my voice wavering between pity and amusement. "Starting a company now," he guffawed as if it was a jest we should have shared. I didn't laugh. Instead, I thanked him for his time and ended the call before I might utter something regrettable, or, worse, insincere. A creeping doubt settled in, silent yet pervasive. On good days, I conquered bugs or completed new features, riding high like a drug addict. But there were darker days, too, when nothing functioned and my laptop malfunctioned, leaving me gazing at my reflection in the black screen, questioning if Marissa had been correct. Pondering if Griffin's smirk represented success, while my struggle seemed like defeat. Yet, I persevered, unable to give up. I recall introducing someone else into our venture for the first time, a junior developer named Lee, who was still pursuing her master's degree. She was eager as a starving wolf and twice as smart. Unable to pay a salary, I offered her partnership and guidance. Without hesitation, she agreed. This was the moment I felt less isolated. We worked together more often than not in silence, powered by energy drinks and stale bagels left in our shared kitchen. She didn't probe about Marissa. She didn't have to. I believe she discerned the battle within me and simply chose her weapon. On one weekend, I slept in my car when the server went down. Not because I lacked a bed. I had one. However, by the time I resolved the final glitch, it was 3:30 am, and I couldn't justify the half-hour drive home only to return shortly after. So I reclined my seat. Covering my eyes was putty, while a city unaware and uncaring hummed softly as I rebuilt my life in its periphery. Then something changed 3 months into the process. I received a response from one of the many companies I cold emailed, a mid-sized investment firm this time. They were tired of expensive solutions with cluttered interfaces. What they desired was straightforward analytics with real-time updates. They weren't interested in my resume or who my ex-wife was seeing. Their focus was solely on what I could create. I showcased a trial demo for them. Within 2 days, they agreed to a temporary contract. My first payment, $15,000, delivered via courier in a thick envelope. It sat unopened in my hands as if crafted from glass. I recall sitting in the driver's seat of my car in the co-working space parking lot, gazing at my name next to a figure that felt both monumental and intimately personal. My thoughts didn't wander towards its potential usage. Pondering on the reasons behind my achievement, it wasn't due to someone's faith in me or a fresh opportunity given, but because I refused to fade away. In that car, I didn't sob loudly, rather, I let out quiet, healing tears that pierced the shield I'd worn for months. I chose not to wipe my face until the tears evaporated on their own. That night, instead of popping champagne or indulging in a lavish dinner, I purchased a large whiteboard and placed it next to our desk setup in the co-working space the following day. I scribbled 3 words at the top: no turning back. Gradually, more clients arrived, like a dripping faucet starting to flow. The word spread. Lee introduced a classmate, while I recruited an old colleague tired of corporate servitude. We operated on folding tables and borrowed monitors, but we began to resemble a genuine team. Each day, I worked with renewed vigor. No longer seeking to demonstrate anything to Marissa, I was instead validating myself. Occasionally, my social media feed would reveal Griffin's recent travels, pictures of him and Marissa horseback riding in Argentina or presenting a gourmet meal in Paris. The images were polished, edited, arranged, but they didn't elicit the sting they once did. Instead, they felt empty, as if something significant was absent behind the costly grins. I wasn't envious, I was engaged, I was constructing, and that was the distinction. People often discuss transformation, the revenge body, new wardrobe, social media posts proclaiming, "I'm thriving without you," but they seldom mention the struggle. The evenings spent eating dinner as a cereal meal and coding until my vision blurred. The mornings where I showered in the sink because of plumbing issues but still had to deliver a pitch. The unseen hours that go unnoticed, the ones that truly matter. I experienced those hours. I bled through them. At last, I grasped the reason behind their investment momentum. The startup wasn't merely existing, it was thriving. Clients led to more clients. The whiteboard brimmed with ideas. The team expanded. I no longer resided in my car. Instead, I returned to regular sleep. We achieved our first 5-figure month. I revised the prototype, then the website, subsequently expanding our service range. We had evolved beyond a solution, becoming an acknowledged presence. People ceased their laughter. And me? I ceased to look back. An invitation graced me on a Wednesday, a cream-colored cardstock, adorned with gold embossed letters and sealed with wax, as if it were royal correspondence rather than the ironic RSVP for an engagement dinner. Marissa and Griffin cordially invited me to dine with them. Half a year after she left our shared life, she now wished for my presence as she raised a toast with another man. It could have been pity or a strategic move. Regardless, it was deliberate. She wished me to witness the empire she believed she'd construct during my absence. I pondered over the envelope for a considerable time, uncertain whether to chuckle or destroy it. However, I didn't perform either action. Instead, I preserved it. I positioned it on the edge of my whiteboard as a reminder, not because I still harbored affection for her, no longer did, but because there's an allure in being readmitted to a space where they once believed you wouldn't return. Such an invitation isn't a gesture of peace, it's enticement, and I was no longer the type of man who accepted it with fearful hands. I didn't immediately make up my mind to go. I allowed the thought to mature, like tea steeping. I examined Griffin's firm's most recent SEC filing. I had been monitoring his quarterly performance since he entered my life with that self-assured, polished demeanor. His figures weren't disastrous, but they weren't exceptional anymore. Some declines, a warning due to a missed projection. Nothing catastrophic, merely fine lines. And cracks expand, so I chose an action. I arrived late, intentionally, to make a statement. 35 minutes post the initial course being served, the venue matched my expectations, pretentious and overpriced. It was a rooftop garden adorned with soft fairy lights, playing jazz just loud enough to exude exclusivity, which Marissa always appreciated, the illusion of elevation. I wore a sleek charcoal blazer over a black shirt, no tie. The fit was contemporary and well-tailored. Time and success had subtly reshaped my features, tightening my jawline, sharpening my gaze. Alone, without a date or backup, I entered. Confidence and quietude were my companions. They spoke volumes, louder than any plus one. The first to recognize me was a college friend of Marissa's, the type who once addressed me like a charitable project. Her eyebrows arched upon seeing me. She murmured something to the woman beside her. A wave began there, heads turning, conversations pausing. I could sense the room adjusting, readjusting around me. Unexpectedly, they didn't foresee my arrival in such an unblemished state, as if I hadn't suffered or pleaded for her to remain. I navigated towards the gift table, filled with anticipated silver platters, champagne flutes, and a crystalline decanter. I set down a solitary bottle, Ridgeview Blanc de Blanc 2015 vintage, an uncommon, costly, and sophisticated choice. The label sufficed as a message. I faced the room's center where toasts were underway. Griffin stood there, holding a flute of champagne, his other arm shielding Marissa. She was resplendent indeed, her hair stylish, dress graceful, smile captivating. Yet, it didn't penetrate her eyes. Not truly. Griffin subtly adjusted his stance, giving a quick glance to the crowd before fixing his gaze on me momentarily. His speech remained unwavering, but his bearing shifted, more rigid, more guarded. He suggested that sometimes life grants you a second opportunity to enhance your circumstances. Laughter echoed, biting, contrived, collusive. Marissa joined in the laughter, her head nodding slightly towards him as if they had practiced it before. It was a calculated move, meant to be a jibe, a show, a public statement that she had moved on up. I offered a smile briefly. Then I strolled forward casually, as if I had all the time in the world. "Congratulations," I said, loud enough for others to hear. I looked at her first, then him. "I brought a bottle of Ridgeview. You'll appreciate it. It complements seafood and false confidence well." That remark hit home. Some guests tensed up. Griffin blinked once. Marissa's smile faltered slightly, barely noticeable. I moved closer, but not too close, just enough that they could now only hear me clearly. "Here's hoping your second chance doesn't lead to an SEC investigation." Griffin's last quarter was intriguing. I nodded at both of them. Not a warning, simply sharing information, simply stating the truth. Then I turned and walked away deliberately. No need to hurry. Each step resonated like a period. I didn't glance back. There was no need. The ensuing silence was sufficient. Such silence arises when a crowd is too astonished to utter a word. The night proved unexpectedly cool as I exhaled deeply, similar to a breath taken after departing from a chamber filled with smoke and illusions. Victory was not my emotion. Rather, I felt purified, having shed the final vestige of the persona she had left behind me. Minutes later, my phone vibrated. Lee was still engrossed in refining a UI flow for a fresh client. I offered her advice and promised to arrive early. Slipping the device into my pocket, I strolled 3 blocks to where my car waited. On this journey home, I pondered Griffin's words, a second chance to upgrade. Perhaps there was truth in that. Yet, what he overlooked is that at times, the enhancement isn't a new person. Sometimes, it's transforming into the self. No one anticipated you'd become the one who no longer craves revenge because maturity rendered it obsolete. Without needing to linger and witness the collapse, abandon the container and depart. As I steered clear of that rooftop, my grip on the wheel relaxed. I grasped that reacquainting oneself with those who underestimated you earlier is not about demonstrating your current self. It's about reminding yourself that you never required their approval to grow further. That realization, it justified every tranquil, laborious hour that led me there. It was 1:13 m. I recall the precise moment because I had recently completed reworking an API integration for the third time. My eyes stung. The blue light from my screen had started obscuring everything else in sight. The shared workspace was vacant. Only me, my hoodie, and the background hum of machines that didn't care about my success or failure were there. Lee had left long ago, battling an obstinate analytics issue. I suggested she rest. I stated I'd handle whatever remained. I usually did, and then the sound came. The ding. Initially, I assumed it was a regular calendar alert or payment verification, almost disregarding it. However, something compelled me to click. Let's discuss. The sender was Roland Pierce, a name that should have held no significance anymore. He was merely a fleeting memory from my EC days. At a business gathering during graduate school, we only exchanged brief words. He had delivered a panel talk, wore a steely blue suit, and responded to a query with the haughty assurance that wealth often affords. We shook hands. I shared details of a dashboard prototype I was developing. He said if it ever became substantial, he'd be interested. It seemed I had finally given it substance. I opened the message and reread it thrice. Jonah, through an old acquaintance, I've noticed your advancements. Vanguard Pulse indeed has teeth. Let's talk. My heart didn't flutter, it thumped. Sluggishly, heavily, purposefully. I eased back into the creaky chair and allowed the gravity of those words to descend upon me. Over the past 4 months, I had dispatched over 300 emails. Responses came from 11. 3 showed strong interest, 2 disappeared. Then this happened. After sending a meeting link, I couldn't sleep that night due to nervous tension. As the sun rose through a grubby window of our shared space, it seemed like a holy sight. 48 hours later, we met on Zoom. Roland skipped pleasantries. He praised my creation as lean, scalable, and disruptive while flipping through the presentation I'd emailed. However, his interest wasn't solely about technology. It was due to our past encounter when I confidently pitched. He remembered my determination to outperform others in the room. I remained silent, listening attentively. Here's what he proposed: $2.2 million in seed funding, with me retaining majority ownership. We agreed on milestones. I maintained control. Deal accepted. No hesitation. No negotiation. I recognized my worth and was aware that momentum often strikes once and doesn't return. My business documents progressed at an unexpected pace. By the end of a week, Vanguard Pulse received capital investment, retained legal counsel, and received a flood of messages from recruiters and consultants who had suddenly noticed our potential. Individuals who hadn't responded to my emails 3 months prior now sought casual coffee meetings to discuss synergy. Within 10 days, we vacated the shared workspace and leased a downtown loft office that was previously an artist's studio. The space featured exposed brick, high ceilings, and abundant natural light. It was raw and unfinished, making it ideal for our needs. I purchased towering white shelves and covered one entire wall with them. Every inch of space was utilized for client mapping, rollout schedules, data pipelines, and projection models. We hired a competent back-end leader, a growth strategist, and an ex-designer who had previously worked at one of the top e-commerce platforms. We advanced rapidly but cautiously. I wasn't constructing a buzz-generating apparatus. I was erecting a stronghold. 3 months later, the first acquisition materialized. A lesser rival with stylish dashboards but faulty reasoning. They were rapidly exhausting resources. We acquired them, assimilated their clients, and merged their assets into our system. This move was strategic, calculated one that made competitors pause. It wasn't showy or loud, it was simply smart. That's the identity we were assuming, an intelligent machine cloaked as a startup. One evening around 8 p.m. in our new office, I stood alone amidst silence, not emptiness. The quiet had a pulsating undercurrent of promise. Gazing out the window at the city below, once hostile and offering my wife a more attractive, glamorous alternative, I now felt a sense of ownership over its skyline. I pondered Marissa not with resentment, but with lucidity. She had once regarded me as all prospect with no fulfillment, as if I might amount to something one day, given her guidance. Once upon a time, I constructed something she couldn't reach, claim credit for, or comprehend. While Griffin boasted restaurants, I held the upper hand with data. As data reigned supreme, journalists, tech bloggers, podcasters, and even the cunning firm with precise metrics began to seek me out, eager to hear my tale. I provided them with a glimpse, but not of the hardships, the sleepless nights in my car, or the humiliation. Instead, they heard about the blueprint, the strategy, the journey. We commenced closing agreements that once seemed impossible, dealing with multinational clients, hedge funds, and public sector agencies. Our head of product, Lee, overhauled the interface anew. Our platform didn't merely depict figures, it transformed confusion into coherence. It was then I recognized I had surpassed the point of no return. I found myself amidst a private gathering hosted by Roland, where perhaps 50 influential individuals gathered C-levels, investors, big names in tight circles. At the bar, nursing bourbon, I was tapped on the shoulder. It was Griffin, not Marissa present. Just him, his expression momentarily unsteady, not from fear but puzzlement. I, the man he outmaneuvered, the name he eliminated, was supposed to be insignificant. Yet here I stood, amidst people eager to engage with me, not borrowing their respect, but earning it. "Jonah," he attempted, keeping his voice nonchalant, "I didn't know you were here." I lifted my glass and smiled. "I am the essence." He didn't chuckle. Instead, he merely nodded before disappearing into the crowd, likely comprehending the same realization that Marissa would soon grasp. I wasn't simply enduring anymore. I was ascending. The best aspect, I owed none of it to them. They claim time heals all wounds. That's falsehood. Time doesn't mend. It merely changes the focus, not alleviating the memory of treachery, but molding you until you can bear it without flinching. A year later, I crossed paths with Marissa, holding Griffin's hand, but this time I ensured our eyes met intentionally, not by coincidence or mistake. The day began ordinarily enough, a serene Saturday when the city was still waking up. I had just concluded a breakfast meeting with one of our fintech partners and was en route to our newly established Arts District office. I wasn't in a hurry. I was cruising in my new Lucid Air, a graphite black vehicle with cream leather interior, elegant, silent, assertive, not bought for show, but admired as a mobile work of art. As I neared the intersection close to her old neighborhood, I spotted it before I fully registered. The condo, identical to the one Marissa had moved into after leaving me with Griffin. The faded gray paint around the mailbox and the familiar crack in the sidewalk under the tree details I hadn't noticed in over a year. Yet, this morning, it felt like destiny. Then I saw her. A woman was walking down the street ahead of me, donning black yoga pants, a hoodie, and an unintentional frown. Her hair was hastily tied back in a bun. She didn't seem radiant, nor did she appear cheerful. Rather, she seemed exhausted not from a single sleepless night, but from prolonged, hidden discontent. The man following her, Griffin, had his attention fixed on his phone, oblivious to her presence. clad in designer joggers, aviators, and a pricey brand's logo peeking from beneath his jacket. He moved without looking up once. He didn't require my attention, so I eased my pace as I approached the red traffic light, giving myself enough time and space to observe her unnoticed. I didn't drive the rundown Toyota that vibrated on potholes. I wasn't the man pleading for her to remain, standing in a cramped apartment with only assurances and incomplete ideas. Instead, I was attired in a fitted navy shirt, wore a sophisticated watch on my wrist, and found myself thinking ahead of where I once stood. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, her gaze drifted toward my vehicle. Merely a glance, followed by another, more prolonged look. She seemed to be stirred by something in her past. Then she spotted me. I remained expressionless, refraining from greeting or signaling how long I'd been anticipating this encounter. Instead, I fixed my gaze forward, sunglasses on, composed demeanor. As if she were background noise in a tale, I had already concluded the narrative. However, I observed her response. I saw the bewilderment, then the shock, then something else hidden behind her eyes. Not remorse, not yet, but acknowledgement. She recognized my transformation, or perhaps who I no longer was. She pulled Griffin's sleeve. Glancing up, initially irritated, he spotted my vehicle. Whether he recognized it was me or not, he understood significance resided behind the wheel. Sufficient for him, he stood tall, readjusted his spectacles, yet missed the opportunity as the light switched to green. I departed at a leisurely pace, composed and controlled. The electric motor didn't growl, it murmured softly, mirroring my life's transformation, subtle, unnoticed but palpable. As I navigated the turn, I glanced back via the rearview mirror and saw her still stationary, observing. Griffin had resumed walking, yet she remained rooted on the same pavement where she once walked away from me, preserved in a moment now under my command. There was a poetic quality to it. Effortlessly, roles change when one decides not to remain fractured. She was the one who progressed while I watched before. Now I am the movement, the enigma she couldn't resolve. Traveling further blocks, I permitted myself to exhale deeply. In no way triumphant, but tranquil, it was then I understood that I didn't long for her return. There was no compulsion for her to chase me or justify herself. Neither did I seek an apology nor recognition. All I desired was for her to observe me, truly see me, and comprehend that I flourished without her. The void she left echoed once as unbearable, but it transformed into a canvas filled with creativity, self-discipline, and ambition. What she had abandoned was merely a man with aspirations, but no resources, no more. And now I became the man with both. That evening, I returned to my mansion, adorned with 6 bedrooms, glass walls, and a panorama of the city like a pledge. Upon the patio, I sipped Ardbeg, letting the wind flow through my shirt. I watched as the sun dissolved into the horizon, listening only to the whispers of the wind and emptiness. I pondered over the length of time it took me to no longer crave closure. I remembered my struggles for someone who had abandoned hope in me before she departed. Each day, I questioned myself if her words were foreshadowing or retribution. "You'll never succeed without me." She spoke as if it were a fact. Yet it was a challenge, and I responded to the challenge. Now I no longer sought revenge. I didn't desire for her world to crumble. Instead, I wished to construct mine to be immense, complete, self-reliant. So vast that she couldn't help but see from afar that I thrived without her and even improved. Some spirits are best viewed in the rearview mirror, not to chase them, but to acknowledge the lessons they imparted and carry on forward. So I did, and I never looked back. There's a unique sound a heavy door makes when it closes for the first time bearing your name. It's unlike rental doors, those that groan with borrowed time and precarious leases. The sound wasn't from flimsy hinges or worn locks. It resonated deeply and indelibly final. After signing the last documents for the estate, as I pushed open the massive black oak door, that sound reverberated within me like a ritual. I lingered in the doorway for a moment, clutching a champagne glass in one hand and the keys in the other, unsure which was more significant. The house boasted 6 bedrooms, glass walls, and a panoramic city view, the same city that had once shrouded me in humiliation and insignificance. Now it belonged to me, not just the property, but the site, the perspective, the elevated position. I had ascended silently until the entire skyline lay beneath me. The house was more than a purchase, it was a proclamation. Vanguard Pulse had recently secured its sixth major client, an enterprise logistics firm whose inefficiencies we reduced by 38% within the first month alone. They wrote a check of such magnitude I double-checked the zeros. When the agreement was sealed, I chose not to celebrate publicly or share it on social media. I contacted my realtor, arranged for the closing, and chose the house I had saved a year earlier when I resided in a studio apartment with a bed on the floor. The process took 3 hours to finalize, and I diligently read every line, not due to doubt, but to experience each signature. A man should savor such moments, having previously experienced hardship. In the afternoon, following the completion of all legal formalities, I drove out to the property with open windows, a quiet car, and no music. I didn't need background music. The wind and my thoughts sufficed. Upon arrival, I found myself there as the sun began its descent, illuminating the white stone and tall glass panels enveloping the front of the house in gold. The lawn was recently mowed, and the walkway was adorned with small uplights that had not yet been activated. I stepped onto the porch, holding a drink, and stood there, breathing, observing as the shadows lengthened. I donned a white shirt, sleeves rolled up to my elbows, and gray trousers. The look was deliberate minimalism. There was no need for ostentatious display. The house spoke volumes on its own. Then, as if summoned by destiny, a familiar car pulled over at the curb near my house. I identified it immediately, Marissa's silver Lexus. It seemed to be scanning the area, or perhaps it was fate's cruel coincidence. Maybe it was something else entirely. Inside the car, Griffin sat in the driver's seat, wearing sunglasses, his face inscrutable. Marissa was in the passenger seat, her phone on her lap, her hands restless. She glanced up as the car stopped right in front of my house. Her mouth dropped slightly, not overly so, not theatrically. It was just enough for me to understand that she hadn't known, hadn't anticipated. She hadn't noticed my name on the property sale records, hadn't realized that this mansion, hidden behind hedges and iron gates, now belonged to the man she abandoned in a small apartment with a damaged sink and too many unfulfilled dreams. I raised my champagne glass towards them. Not a greeting nor a salute, merely a subtle recognition. Her gaze bore into mine, then she glanced beyond me at the house, its lofty windows, the rounded balcony, the pool's shimmer barely noticeable from the side vantage. The smirk on Griffin faded. I watched it dissipate in slow motion. The bravado he sported like perfume dissolved behind the windshield. He attempted to conceal his surprise, but that was the issue with arrogance, it struggles to hide dismay. I remained still, did not advance. I desired them to sense the distance, not the spatial gap, but the emotional abyss that had emerged between who I once was and who I had morphed into. They could no longer cross it. Not any longer. They didn't alight. They didn't wave. They simply stayed put for a few more moments before, without indication, the car rolled forward and disappeared down the slope. I did not pursue them. I turned to my door, entered, and closed it behind me. The shutting door's reverberation permeated the entrance, coursed through my heart, seeped into every craving nook within me that yearned for finality. And just like that, I no longer sought it. The manor still reeked of fresh paint and polish. Marble floors remained chilly underfoot. A hallway extended into a sunken living room, boasting a built-in fireplace and an expansive sectional I hadn't occupied yet. Floor-to-ceiling windows encased the city in a living canvas. I wandered leisurely through the chambers, traced the edges of countertops, ran fingers along the balustrade of the spiral staircase. The upstairs office was already equipped for efficiency, with my name engraved on the glass door. This wasn't retaliation. This wasn't a show of power. It embodied defiance against being confined. No images of Marissa adorned these walls. No specters. No echoes. The chambers resonated only with quietude and promise. Standing in the master bedroom, still clad from the day, I gazed out from the corner window, taking in the panoramic cityscape. The skyline extended for miles, with minuscule cars dotted below and buildings resembling chess pieces. I could have lingered in that moment eternally. However, instead, I retrieved my phone, created a new memo, and scribbled, "This is what a building looks like." Subsequently, I switched off my phone. That night, I arranged for a bottle of Barolo, uncorked it myself, and settled by the pool as light danced across the water. My thoughts were consumed by the betrayal, laughter, whispered names at parties, sleepless nights, aching body, empty room silence, and cold judgment from those who doubted my rise. Yet here I was not merely standing or surviving, but home, sitting on my own front porch, behind my own front door, in a house I purchased with determination and foresight, without anyone's approval. It wasn't simply an address, it was evidence. Planned to sleep with all windows open that night, letting the breeze scatter my tale across the globe, not as an alarm, but softly. A hey appeared on my phone screen unexpectedly, without any mark of punctuation, name, or context. I was in my kitchen, the one adorned with imported stone countertops and an espresso machine that exceeded the cost of our shared bed with Marissa. The sun had barely risen. Having just completed a run through the hills, I still breathed the pure, tranquil air that always helped me ponder. And there it was, her name on the screen, as if it was always meant to be there. Marissa. 3 minutes later, another message followed the initial, "Hey, didn't anticipate you owning this house." I examined it for a while. Not with anger, nor even surprise, but merely curiosity. She knew somehow, perhaps through a neighbor or some other means. Possibly from a mutual acquaintance who passed by and was shocked at the sight. Perhaps it was Griffin himself, realizing the man he once ridiculed now lived in the house intended for him. I remained silent initially, not immediately nor actually ever. 10 minutes elapsed, then another message. "You look fantastic, Jonah." I left my phone on the counter and prepared breakfast: eggs, avocado toast, basic dishes that were once shared on quiet Sundays, when we still believed work equaled love. The messages poured in like raindrops on a rooftop, each one softer than the last, each one reaching out to a place she no longer inhabited. "I'm lost for words. Can we speak? It's not as you think." This message stopped me because I thought nothing at all. That was the change. I wasn't enraged. I didn't yearn for her to justify herself anymore. Regarding when she encountered Griffin or the duration of their covert interactions, my interest waned. No answers were required. I had already endured the most harrowing part, being informed by someone I once would have sacrificed everything for that I wasn't good enough. So I exercised the greatest potency at my disposal. I remained silent. In that quietude, a weight seemed to dissipate, resembling a scab that shed without agony. Marissa persisted in texting for several days, not incessantly, but often enough. This was a digital trickle of guilt, nostalgia, and concealed yearning. She didn't express her longing outright or apologize, but the spaces between her words communicated what her pride wouldn't let her type. I caught wind of the Forbes interview. "You truly accomplished it. We were merely in distinct phases at that time. I never anticipated you would actually go through with it." There it was not a full-fledged apology, but more akin to a confession. This last message lingered for hours. One evening, while seated on the balcony with a glass of bourbon, I observed the city below, the same city where she departed me with laughter, the same city where Griffin presented her as a trophy, a testament that I had been replaced. Memories of the day she taunted me about my supposed inability to survive without her flooded my mind. Her gaze lingered on me like a half-baked scheme. Her laughter once seared my chest, but now it was extinguished, leaving behind steel. I navigated through our old chat history, scrolling back to the messages from days when she'd send good luck notes before meetings. The times she asked me to collect Ty on the way home. When she sent hearts, humorous memes, and half-clad selfies from the bathroom mirror, promising impatience until my return. That was a different Marissa. A version I hadn't encountered in quite some time. That Marissa vanished long before the divorce, long before Griffin. I departed from the conversation and disabled notifications from her number. It wasn't a block, merely a mute. I wanted her to understand that my messages were being sent, but not received. The fact was, she wasn't sending messages to me, at least not genuinely. Instead, she was addressing the persona she had never envisioned would materialize, the man she doubted. But now that he was tangible, now that he was flourishing, she craved his presence. Yet, I no longer shone for her. I had nothing left to prove, neither to her nor to anyone else. Toward the end of that week, Lee observed that something seemed amiss during a gathering. "Are you all right?" she inquired, her gaze probing me with gentle worry. I affirmed yes, merely reminiscing about the sensation of silence once felt. She didn't pry. She never did. That was one of the things I admired about her. She respected spaces others always tried to invade. On that Friday, I organized a small dinner at my residence for the team. A select group of 12, our core management, our initial clients, a few trusted confidants were present. We dined, we chuckled, recounting memories of when each of us nearly abandoned this venture in the initial stages. At dessert, I rose and offered a toast. To the skeptics, I declared, may they constantly remind us of the sensation of being undervalued, and let us perpetually construct until their opinions hold no weight. They applauded, not due to the poetry, but because they had experienced it as well. Every individual in that room had been told no more times than they could remember. Yet, they were now part of something greater than retaliation. They were part of evidence. After everyone departed, I remained by the pool, my legs submerged, the glimmering reflections of city lights shimmering beside me. My phone buzzed again with a message. "Marissa." A fleeting moment, I felt something. Not sadness, not rage, but understanding. Because now I grasped what she never did. Belief isn't something you command. It's something you acquire. In the end, I discovered how to bestow it upon myself without a response. Instead, I shut off my phone, reclined on the chill stone ledge, and closed my eyes. The air was soothingly soft, the quietness undisturbed. It was within that tranquility that I unearthed a peace she could no longer shatter again. My retribution wasn't about fire, but freedom, and I wore it as a shield. The lighting was comforting rather than glaring, arranged to generate a tender glow that made me seem as if I was always destined for this seat. Opposite me sat Darren Fielding, the host of a tech and finance podcast where Griffin had once fervently pleaded to be highlighted. Dubbed the pinnacle, it was the kind of show that discerned hype from legacy. I comprehended what this instance signified. Not for them, but for me. It wasn't merely a feature, it was a marker in the narrative. The scene where the man once written off strides into the limelight, unfazed, unbound, and completely in command. Darren moved closer, his forearms resting on the table, speaking softly with calculated interest. "So, Jonah," he inquired, a question often asked when your name is mentioned today, "how did you transition from being seen as the one left behind to heading one of the nation's most monitored analytics firms?" I remained composed. I didn't flinch nor shrink back. Instead, I smiled and replied, "I was underestimated, and I chose not to dispute that. I simply worked." He chuckled, giving a nod in agreement. "Understandable, but there must have been a pivotal moment, something significant." "There were several," I answered, "but the defining one? My ex-wife told me I'd never succeed without her." Darren paused, his gaze sharpened. That was the key comment. That was the headline. "She departed," I elaborated, "for someone more glamorous, richer. At the time, she desired the polished product. I was still in the process of evolving." The room remained silent except for the faint hum of the audio equipment in the background. His producer raised a finger, signaling to continue. "What about you?" Darren inquired. "I didn't plead, I didn't pursue, I didn't rage. I constructed. Each insult, each doubt, every time someone doubted my abilities, I utilized them as building blocks." He chuckled. "That's the kind of line people remember." "Fine," I replied, mirroring his smile. "Here's another one for you. She demanded more. So I gave myself more and constructed something unnecessary to reveal." That resonated. I could see it in his face, the subtle retreat in his chair, the recognition that this wasn't merely a tale of redemption. It was a transformation, and I wasn't telling it with bitterness. Just sincerity. We conversed for another half hour. About Vanguard Pulse, the initial ramen dinners and car sleeping, the first check I received, the seed funding, the acquisition that made rivals regard us seriously. I spoke candidly. No drama, no exaggeration, just the facts, devoid of ego, reinforced with tenacity. Darren inquired, leaning closer once more. Is it possible she's observing this? I returned his gaze, composed and resolute. I hope so, I replied. If she is, she's learning something from me now. There was no malice in the statement, merely a truth. The words she had once used to scar me were powerless now. They lingered like echoes. She had abandoned the plan, and now the structure stood complete. Post-recording, I shook hands with the team, thanked them, and stepped out into the late evening illumination. The city remained active, rhythmic. Yet, I was invulnerable now. Not in a boastful manner, but in the sense that I had become my own focal point. As I strolled towards my car, my phone buzzed again with notifications, messages, and mentions. The episode hadn't yet been released, but Darren had already uploaded a backstage photo of us during our chat, along with a quote from the episode. She yearned for more, so I offered more of myself, and the comment section, ablaze. This is gold. Who is this man? A new favorite episode unfolds. Yet, what left a lasting impact was the private message received 5 minutes afterward. From her. Krissa, I just saw the post. You truly accomplished it. Your remarkable transformation as Jonah. I didn't open it. I didn't have to. The preview spoke volumes. I could visualize her now, phone in hand, possibly in that condo she once deemed an upgrade. Perhaps Griffin wasn't present. Or maybe he was, and she still texted me despite this. Maybe she had poured herself a glass of wine, sitting on the edge of their bed, watching a snippet of me on screen, struggling to comprehend how the man she left had morphed into this version of himself. However, the essence of evolution is silent. It doesn't declare itself with fanfare. Instead, it unveils itself one day, unrecognizable to those who once underestimated your strength. I drove home with the windows open. No music played. Just the sound of the wind and the soft echo of closure that didn't demand confrontation. 3 days after the episode release, it ignited. Tech Twitter was ablaze. LinkedIn was overwhelmed with reposts and commentary. Suddenly, every investor who had previously overlooked my messages sought meetings. Every podcast desired my presence. I wasn't simply a CEO anymore. I symbolized determination. Lee visited my office with her laptop open. We surpassed 500,000 views in less than a day. I acknowledged, skimming through papers on my desk. Good. Let it thrive. She hesitated before departing. Could she be watching it repeatedly? I looked up. Perhaps. But she's observing something that no longer belongs to her. That's the distinction. During that weekend, I organized a closed round table at the estate with 3 other founders who constructed their companies from rejection. We didn't discuss former partners or treachery. We discussed momentum, guidance, and financial prudence. There was a time, towards midnight, once the wine had weakened our defenses, when he mentioned, my previous partner claimed I was merely a daydreamer. I lifted my glass and grinned. Daydreamers construct landscapes. Skeptics only observe. That night, prior to sleeping, I scrutinized her last message. You're astonishing. I glanced at it for a few moments, then erased it. No response. No remnant. No pang. I didn't require blocking her. She was already beyond reach. It had been precisely 1 year, the very same day, a year since Marissa stood in our doorway with her luggage, heels, and Griffin's looming shadow outside. A year since she told me I wouldn't succeed without her. A year since I stared at an empty wardrobe and swore to myself that I'd become everything she believed I couldn't be and beyond. So I hosted a gathering. Not a boisterous one. Not a spectacle. A rooftop soiree with the people who mattered. My team. My kin. A handful of early supporters who had witnessed me shatter, yield, and reconstruct. The balcony shimmered under strings of lights entwined around metal supports, soft jazz echoing beneath chatter. Laughter bubbled like champagne, rising high. It wasn't about vengeance or demonstration anymore. It was gratitude, it was grace, and it belonged to me. My parents were there, beaming silently, sipping from glasses of effervescent water, while exchanging smiles with Lee, who had successfully executed a rollout last week that doubled our clientele. My niece danced freely beneath the lights, her curls bouncing, her laughter the kind that makes you forget any past fractures. It was tranquility, honest tranquility. As the night grew chilly and the city lights came alive below, Lee clinked her glass with a spoon, drawing attention. The murmur subsided. People looked up. Standing on the edge of the balcony, wine in hand, she smiled. To the silent builders, she started. To those who don't yell when they are dismantled, who don't exhibit their pain for attention. Those who respond with deeds rather than words exemplify discipline over drama. This is the scene when one chooses this path, as we have witnessed Jonah construct from embers. Not for admiration or confirmation, but because he believed in his potential, even when others did not. Thus, here's to delivering outcomes, to a silence that resonates more profoundly than anything else, and to our founder who taught us that triumph doesn't shout, it simply appears. Initially, the applause was subdued, then escalated. I was unfamiliar with such recognition. I wasn't skilled at dealing with attention. Yet, I raised my glass regardless, meeting Lee's gaze and offering a subtle nod. Thank you. Later, I leaned on the railing, allowing the city to unfold before me like a map I had finally deciphered. The skyline sparkled. The air was invigorating. Beneath, vehicles flowed like consistent pulses, rhythmic, alive. Marissa became insignificant then, shocking me more than anything else. I didn't wish for her pain or her feeling insignificant. I no longer yearned for that instant, which I repeatedly revisited in my mind, where she was on her knees, imploring for another opportunity. It never materialized, because I ceased desiring it. I crafted something too grand to encompass the past. From my pocket, I extracted the last memento I had kept, a photograph. Not of her, but of me. Taken the night she departed. In it, I appeared shattered, diminished. My eyes were hollow. Impulsively, I snapped it while standing before a mirror, as if capturing rock bottom. I tore it in half, tossed it over the edge. The wind carried the fragments into the sky, then down, then away. I thought, let it free, let her go. She appeared at the railing with us, 2 glasses of bourbon in hand. She offered me one. You accomplished it. I turned to her. No. We did. She smiled and tapped her glass against mine. No grand spectacle or finale ensued. The tranquil hush of a hard-won night and the muted delight of those who persevered enough to smile anew. As the final visitor departed, I remained on the terrace. Solitary. I settled in the chair at the farthest corner, one with an unobstructed view towards the edge. The cityscape flickered, stable and serene, much like a heart still beating despite pain. Memories of the journey, the long days, the sleepless nights, the rejection, the silence, the struggle, moments when I questioned if things would ever improve, these thoughts passed through my mind. Yet now they had improved. Closure wasn't a discussion. It wasn't a message. It wasn't even her acknowledging her error. Instead, closure was the perspective. And from this vantage point, there was no need for anyone to respond.